So I've made a lot of wings before. I made these ones and these ones and these ones and this giant 16-foot long pair of wings for my Husk cosplay, which are so large I had to make a second smaller pair so I had something to wear to conventions or anywhere indoors. Apparently, after at least 5 pairs, I'm still not done. Hello, I'm Miss Twisted. You can call me Charlotte. I do cosplay, makeup, and other weird and whimsical stuff. And this time, I am making a set of 8 giant angel wings. For context, this is the second part of a cosplay I'm doing inspired by biblically accurate angels, which are these guys with the rings and the wings and the eyes and the be not afraid vibes. So the dress and corset I made with a lot of white and gold and the creepy eyes and some dripping molten metallic elements. And my plan is to include some of those elements on the wings too. But what I'm worried about is gravity. That is what kicked my butt last time, because the bigger you try and make your wings, they just get heavier exponentially. And now I want to put 8 wings decorated with those same elements on my body. Goddamn, why can't I ever just choose a normal, easy project? Just this one time. Well, let's begin at the beginning and see how we go, and when we get to some problems, we can cry about it. Pay attention, class. This is a safety briefing, not a sponsored section. I need your listening ears for 30 seconds, and if you're good, you'll get a sticker at the end. Your safety and health is your responsibility. Always research the glues, paint, and materials you're using. Determine if you need ventilated space, respirators, safety goggles, gloves, or aprons. If in doubt, read your instructions, read your manuals. Your health and safety should always be a priority over a project, regardless of what dumb or dangerous stuff you see other people doing. That includes me. I have done dumb and dangerous stuff in the past, and I probably will do again. Very good listening, class. Here is your sticker. It is a round chicken that I got from a convention. You're welcome. Before we get to the inevitable crying, we need a pretty strong foundation, like a sturdy panel on which to house all of those wings. And for that, I have a backpack. More specifically, a backpack where I've cut off the front and instead bolted on, I think these are like 2 sandwiched wood chip placemats. If you want to see how I put this together, I will put the link up to my previous wing video. Anyway, the advantage of using a backpack as a base is it's already pretty padded, so it gives you a lot of cushioning to your shoulders and back. It's also made to carry a fair bit of weight, and they're relatively cheap and easy to find secondhand. The Velcro I've sewn on here is so that these pauldrons that I made with the dress can literally just stick over the top, can stick on the top, god damn it, can stick over the top and disguise the ugly straps. But before we start building up the frame, we've got to do some size and scale things. So for that, let me show you the main ingredient to making these wings. So this stuff is 1mm thick polycell packing foam. And this stuff is 3mm thick polycell packing foam. These are from a local Melbourne place called Stanley Packaging. If you're outside of Melbourne, I got no idea where you'd get these from, I'm sorry. That is gonna be your homework. This stuff is fantastic for feathers because it is so light and floaty and holds its shape really well. They do not paint or glue well though, but I found workarounds for both, and we'll get to that. Okay. Welcome to my lounge room floor. Why are we here? I figure it's gonna be the best way that I can kind of visualize and like draw out on some of this foam exactly where all of those wings are gonna sit coming out of my back. Except that I realized that I can't be lying down here and also drawing on the foam. So I guess I'm gonna put my mannequin here and then draw the wings in the shape that I want, and then remove the mannequin, put myself down here, use my camera as a mirror so I can then see if those shapes of wings are gonna work. Now I've made enough wings at this point to be pretty good at just kind of winging it when it comes to doing the shapes, pun definitely intended. But if you want to try something similar and you're struggling with the shapes, I recommend even just like printing out a picture of an actual bird wing and kind of using that as a reference, at least for a starting point. As a general rule, I'm aiming for big long feathers on the bottom towards the outer edges and getting smaller and shorter as they go towards the top and inner part of the wings. Alright, I think this is a pretty good start. Keep in mind, this is not what the final wings are going to look like in terms of shape. The main purpose of doing this step is so that I know for sure that I can make the wing frames the right size and shape, and that they're going to be big enough but not so big that they're all going to be like overlapping and crowding behind my back. For the wing frame itself, we are going to start with PVC pipes, a cosplay staple for prop makers. Now, last few times I made wings like this, I put them onto hinges so that I could like flap them a little bit, and also just made it easy to fold up for transport, but I don't think it's going to work this this time. Because I'm doing 8 wings, they're going to be like a little bit of overlap, so they'll be like constantly getting caught on each other as they swing around. But I do want to attach them in a way that is also detachable, so that I can like disassemble them for transport. I learned that lesson the hard way after trying to fit these monsters into my little car. Now, I did see Lightning Cosplay 3D print these little sockets to slide the PVC pipes into for a Mother Miranda cosplay. I'm just rewatching the footage. That was for 10 wings. Damn. Oh no. Why does that make me want to add 2 more pairs? I don't need to make it 10 pairs just because Lightning Cosplay managed to make 10. Why am I like this? No, 8 wings is plenty of wings. Let's move on before I make my life even more difficult. Anyway, I'm gonna try something a little similar, but just using PVC pipe. I mean, I could 3D print it, but I already have a big pile of these pipes in my garage from previous projects, and I'd rather use what I already have rather than making new stuff. So I'm cutting my 1 larger pipe into 8 smaller sections, and all they need is a light sanding on the ends to get rid of those rougher edges, and we're ready to rumble. Now, the reason I've gone with this trapezium shape is essentially so that I have easy access to this bottom edge with the drill like this, so that I don't have to go through this top edge. Now you can see I've arranged those PVC pipes sort of around the backpack so you can access the top of each of them easily, but they should help spread the wings evenly around my back. I'm going to drill a hole through each of these PVC pipe bits into and through the backpack. And the bolt goes through the backpack, through our PVC pipe, and then tightening that nut on. It was really hard to do with my hands, but I figured out the best method is using a pair of pliers to hold it in place on one end and using the screwdriver on the other to tighten the nut. My friends, we have reached the first error of this video because I have just finished screwing in the bolts on this one so it is nice and secure. Why did it not occur to me that this bolt at the top here is going to get in the way of this pipe slotting in? That should have been so obvious. Luckily, I live like 5 minutes drive from a hardware store, so I'm going to Bunnings. Be right back. Okay, plan B here. I have these really tiny short bolts, which I'm going to try and use on those top sections. And my hope is that they're going to sit flush enough within the pipe that I can still get the smaller PVC pipe through. All right, I think I've got it. I had to use the screwdriver to like push this through the hole and then tighten the nut on while I'm holding everything down, just because it was like so short you could barely catch it on the other side. Okay, now that is almost flush with the pipe. Moment of truth. No, it's still just coming into the pipe a little bit too much. So my plan C here is undo this, switch it around. So instead, that same bolt is gonna go this way. So the nut is gonna sit on the underside here, but the nut's quite thick and the top of the screw is a little bit thinner. So it might give me maybe a couple more millimeters of space to work with, and maybe that'll be enough. Get my screwdriver in here, push that until I can see it on this side. I can just see the bolt poking out here. Come on. What do I do here? I know it's possible. I got it the other way around. How do I get that bolt onto there? I'm gonna have to cut this out more. I need like 8 hands. Oh, I think I got it. Ah, my goodness. Okay. All right. That is well and truly secure in there. This PVC pipe. Okay, I think we got it. All right, it's a tight fit, but that's the idea that I had. So that way, this is well and truly secure, just slotted into there. And of course, the actual other bolt serves quite well on this end to stop it going anywhere further in. Oh my God, I have to do that 8 more times. And so 8 more times I did. And you'd think that it would have gotten easier after a few, but no, getting the bolt through the wood planks and the padding and the fabric, and then somehow managing to get the nut on the other side, it was just a huge pain in the butt. Many swear words and some slightly cramped hands later, we have got it sorted. So let's do a test run and get all these pipes in place. The lighting out here is crunchy. I'm so sorry, guys. Welcome back to my lounge room floor. The PVC pipes are now into the PVC fittings. You can see they're all kind of pointing up towards the corners. That's because I've kept those PVC fittings like sloped upwards. That's just so that gravity helps hold them in place and they're not going to like slide out later on. To fix the problem with the corners, we can heat up the PVC pipes and just slowly start to curve them so that they face more in the direction of my little foam pieces. So respirator on on and all of the doors and windows open, my lounge room is pretty ventilated. As I take out each one to heat it, I am pulling it away from the foam and the backpack just because I really don't want to be heating up that stuff. Once they're hot enough, I'm going to carefully fold these pipes into place so they sort of go in line with the foam wings I've mapped out. Apart from the bottom pair, I'm going to try and avoid having like a full fold in the PVC pipe because it can sort of like take out some of the strength that's going to hold these wings up. So for the rest of them, if you're a little bit more patient with it, you can sort of bend it more gradually and it's going to create like a more even curve, I guess, rather than that dramatic fold. Right now it's giving more creepy octopus rather than angel, but that should be solved once the feathers are on. My next step is going to be cutting off the PVC pipe roughly around here where this little bend in the wing is. So with my PVC pipe cut, this is what it looks like. Still terrifying. This is gonna be a little harder to demonstrate than I thought. I was hoping I didn't have to do this bit on the floor. Oh, hang on, let me take these ones out. Ow, I dropped that on my toe. God damn it. Okay, now I can kind of show you from this side. All right, so that first part of the PVC pipe is gonna support most of the wing here, just leaving this end area here. And the reason I haven't had it go all the way to the end with PVC pipe is I kind of want this end part to have a little bit of movement and springiness to it. So we are gonna use one of my favorite unexpected materials for cosplay I've ever discovered, fishing rods. I landed on fishing rods as an option when I was making my loot wings because I wanted something that was going to be super lightweight, super strong, and had a lot of flex so that the wings could like dance around and sway and swing and still spring back into place. There's a surprising amount of cheap secondhand fishing rods near me, so these are pretty easy to get my hands on. And a lot of them unscrew in the middle, so you can just use the thin whippy part at the top. My Patreon supporters also suggested like cheap tent poles and these things, which are fiberglass cable rods. So between the fishing rods I salvaged out of the loot wings and the fiberglass cables I bought to compare, I should have enough for all 8 wings. So I've got my wing template with me as a guide. I'm going to place one of these cable rods right over the PVC pipe where I roughly want it to sit and mark this out with a Sharpie. Then we're just going to get a hole straight through. And honestly, this would have been much easier if I just like put it into the clamp that I have in the garage, but it's the middle of Australian summer and the least amount of time I spend in the garage, the better. That seems to be working wonderfully, and I just need it to be big enough that I can put this through so it can kind of sit in just on its own. Not to say I trust this to just not fall out, but we'll come back to that. For now, I've got 8 more of these to do. I'm also checking each pair of wings as I go just to make sure that where everything is sitting is pretty symmetrical. With all 8 of these secure, I am just going to run some hot glue around each of these joints just to sort of secure it in place and plug up any surrounding space. And wrap it in masking tape for some reason. As I'm recording voiceover, I don't know why I did this. Okay, if I back way into this corner, I should be able to fit most of that in frame. It doesn't look much different to last time, so trust the process with me here, guys. But at least all of these wings now have the rods on the end, so the frame itself is done. On this bottom wing here, I've taped... No, this is... I'm gonna knock something over in a moment. Hang on. So I've taped one of the templates to the wing frame just so you can, I guess, kind of see where this is going. And one other thing to note is that most of my wings I have curved slightly. So the PVC pipe curves this way a little bit and the rod faces that way too. That basically means that from behind, a lot of these wings are going to tilt forwards a little bit. It's going to do 2 things, I hope. One of them is add some dimension to it so it's not just sitting on a flat plane. The other is just the optical illusion of making them seem bigger because they're going to curve from my back and tilt towards the front. It also means for this one that sits like right behind my shoulders, this is curved slightly away from the back of my head. So hopefully it means that like my hair and my headpiece is not going to get caught on these. Honestly, that kind of foresight doesn't usually come naturally to me. I'm usually like a solving problems as they come up kind of gal. So I'm kind of proud of myself for that one. I've made enough wings now that I've got a pretty decent strategy for how to cut out these feathers. I've got my template in front of me and I'm going to start with the bottom row here along the bottom of the wing. That's going to be row 1. And I've got my 3mm foam and I think I'm just going to kind of guess. I'm going to start with a really ridiculously large feather because I can always cut it down in a moment. Okay, that is a very long, very large first feather, but I do remember that you can go a lot bigger on your first row than you think you can. So I'm gonna trust my gut here, and I'm gonna use that as my first feather. This was one of those moments where I realized like a Cricut or a laser cutter would have been a huge help for me and saved me so much time. I don't really mind cutting things out manually, but when there's this many feathers, it might have added up. So you may have noticed as I was laying these out that I've gone for more of like a curved feather. I think it just looks a bit more like stylized and graceful, a little bit less realistic, but then again, I'm making an angel costume, so I can kind of get away with it. As I mentioned earlier, the general rule is to get your really long, large feathers on that first row and then start to get smaller as you go higher up the wing. Not to say you can't break that rule, maybe you're going for a more stylized, slightly different look. So I've got essentially 3.5 rows of feathers to fill out this wing, and I was gonna cut some of the smaller ones out of the 1mm foam, but I think I'm actually happy with it as just the 3mm. I can use this now to calculate out how many feathers I need to cut, and just brace yourself because there's going to be a lot. Row 1, which is the bottom row, I need at least 8 sets of those. That's 1 for each wing. For rows 2, 3, and this smaller row 4, I need 16 of each of those because I have to cover the front and back of all 8 wings. And in actual fact, I'm going to make 9 sets of row 1 and 18 sets of everything else because I always end up needing a ton of extra feathers. Trust me when I say this, however many feathers you think you're going to need for a project like this, it's not enough. It's never enough. So 128 plus 240 plus 304, 340, 240, 140. So minimum, this is minimum, is 852 feathers. 852 feathers. And if I cut out the spares that I mentioned, it goes up to 936. Part of me wants to find an excuse to add in more feathers just so I can round it up to 1,000, because then I can say that I used 1,000 feathers in this project, which would be kind of cool. There I go again, trying to make my life harder. Let's just stick with getting the minimum cut out first, and we can worry about being a masochist later. Since the larger feathers from row 1 were a little bit more finicky and a bit more like specific in their shape, given they've got that curve, I'm just sort of tracing them and cutting them out like 2 at a time. I did try cutting out like 3 or 4 at once just to save myself some time. Didn't work very well, went back to doing 2 at a time. As we got into the smaller feathers, I'm trying to sort of tessellate them as much as possible just to use as much of the foam as possible while creating as little waste. That said, when you're cutting out this many feathers, there's only so much you can do for that. At the very least, I was able to use the offcuts from around the really large feathers to cut out some of these really tiny ones. So I started cutting out the feathers, I think around 6 p.m. last night. It's now 11 a.m. the next morning, and I've finished cutting out the feathers. To clarify, I didn't pull an all-nighter, I did sleep. I just expected this to take like 2 or 3 days worth of cutting, and I don't know, I think I just got myself into a flow state, and it was just a frenzy of feathers, and now I'm done. So, row 1, row 2, row 3, and row 4. And I've counted these. I have exactly 953 feathers. And of course, I am perfectly content to leave it at almost 1,000. Psych! You fool! You absolute fool! Do you really think I would be normal about this? This entire ongoing project is supposed to be as big and bombastic and extra and ridiculous as I feel like going. So of course I'm going to cut out the extra 47. I'm having mild regrets about doing the reveal with a dramatic throw in the air, because now I have to sort out all of those feathers from all of the offcuts in the floor in front of me. Actually, on the topic of all of these offcut pieces, for starters, my entire floor is so covered in them, this angle does not do it justice. Let me show you what it looks like right now. I'm going to try and throw out as little as possible of this stuff, so I am going to cut it up into smaller pieces and put it into bags. It does make for great like packaging filler, like for example if you're posting or shipping something, or if you're moving house and packing up boxes. I've even used it before as a lightweight filler for cosplay props. Last time I glued a bunch of foam feathers together, which was for these wings here, that was on my lounge room floor, and the goblin in my brain really likes crafting on the floor. Sadly, I have the neck and back of an 80-year-old, so if I'm crafting 8 sets of wings wings, I kind of have to be on a table. My main rookie error last time was doing that inside because hot glue on its own is not toxic. This foam, from what I've now researched, is made of polyethylene foam, which is not toxic unless heated, which is exactly what you're doing when you're gluing it with hot glue. So last time, I really should have been wearing my respirator and doing it in a ventilated area, which is why this time round, I'm doing this in my garage. Also, this wasn't entirely intentional, but I've just realized how perfectly I framed this shot for my cursed erosion bird head just sitting on a shelf behind that cardboard box. Okay. 1,000 feathers to go. Let's get into it. My garage has even more ventilation than my lounge room, and since I am doing 8 wings and gonna be gluing for several days, it's just better safe than sorry. I have a thin sheet of foam down underneath my template just so that I can protect it from dust, and if the hot glue happens to melt through this layer of foam, it's gonna hit the layer of foam below instead of the table. I found last time that most glues just don't work well on this foam, but hot glue seems to have like a welding effect where it works especially well because it heats up the foam at the same time. And it's strong enough that I can get away with just a little tiny bit on the edge to join those feathers up. First row down, and first row is pretty important because it kind of determines the shape of the whole wing. I am going to flip this one upside down. So now we can see the template on this side, and I can cut off all of the excess below where these feathers are glued in. This way, the majority of the first row is visible from this side as well, which means when I start to fill out the back with feathers, I don't need to bring them so far down. I can kind of start the second row around here to cover this stuff, and that way I'm essentially using less feathers on the back, which means less weight overall. And when you're making 8 wings with 1,000 feathers, every little bit of weight that you can save helps. While this is turned around, I'm going to put my other template from this wing pair down over the top of it, and I'm going to use that first wing as essentially a guide so that the second wing can sort of have the feathers in the same position. The only catch here is to be especially careful that you're not applying so much glue that it bleeds onto the wing below. This way, both wings in a pair have a similar silhouette to each other, so it feels symmetrical. From here, it is pretty smooth sailing as we start to build up these feathers. I've also noticed this foam is a little bit elastic, so you can pull and manipulate it slightly to create some curves. That way, each feather has a bit more dimension to it. That is going to be quite useful for this one because I'm not going to be painting these feathers with any shading or highlights. Before we reach the top row, I'm going to turn this over and get my frame attached. Not sure if this is the best way to do it, but I put glue on either side of the rod and then press another feather over the top, kind of creating like a long pocket for the rod. Because of how the wing frame curves away from the table here, it was way easier doing the rest on the other side. That way, as I'm gluing, gravity just kind of helps show exactly where the wing is gonna sit against the wing frame, and you can just glue it down accordingly. With the wing frame done, I can bring those feathers all the way up to the top now, and you might notice that I've cut a lot of these feathers a little bit thinner as I'm going, so I did end up using a lot more on these wings. I guess my gut instinct just said to go finer and smaller towards the top here. And let's be honest guys, if I didn't use the spare feathers for this, I would have found an excuse to use them elsewhere on the wings just so I could reach that 1,000. With the front filled with feathers and feeling fabulous, I'm gonna start filling out the back with feathers as well. Going just a little bit more sparse in terms of detail because I really just need it to be like covering those raw edges rather than super detailed. 2 wings down, 6 to go. I'm gonna call it there because we are in the middle of Melbourne summer, which means it is gonna get boiling hot outside, so I'm really only gonna be in the garage for a couple hours in the morning before it becomes like literally a greenhouse. So I'll leave it there and hopefully finish off the rest during the week. We had the weirdest weather for the few days I was gluing, guys. I'd be going out early morning in like leggings and a hoodie and shivering, and within 1 hour I would be sweating buckets changed into a singlet and shorts. That is the infamous Melbourne weather for you guys. Or maybe it's just my inability to acclimatize. So after about 4 days worth of gluing feathers, I have 8 wings. I know I'm only holding 4 of them, but I can't fit 8 in my hands even for dramatic effect. But what I can do is put all of these into my mannequin harness so we can kind of get an idea of what this is finally going to look like. That is a problem for future Charlotte. You guys, tell me this isn't the coolest thing you have ever seen me make. Look at this. Oh my god, it's not even done. It's not that I didn't think I could do it or that it looks different from how I thought it would look. It looks exactly like I imagined in my head. Also, sorry for the blue hands. I've been dyeing fabric. Anyway, I'm just still a little bit flabbergasted at how good this looks. All right, reining in. For starters, I'm gonna try this on temporarily outside to make sure that the weight is something I can handle, and then that's gonna be it until the grand reveal. I can't actually wear this inside because right now I'm a fair bit taller than this mannequin and the top wings are literally brushing the ceiling. So I literally cannot wear this inside.
Another tiny change, I am tweaking some of these exposed pipe areas, particularly on the top wings, just because they were kind of crisscrossing over right at the top, so I'm just spreading them out a tiny bit.
Now, embellishments. We are going to notch each of the feathers. So each feather is basically just going to get like a couple of notches cut out of it, and I try and do maybe like 2 to 3 each feather and vary a little bit where they're placed, and it's just enough to kind of like suggest the texture of a feather without having to do like a gazillion of these on each one. Actually, that might not technically count as embellishment because you're like subtracting from the costume rather than putting stuff on.
Totally niche bit of advice for you guys, but the more of these notches you put into your feathers, the more shaggy they'll look. So if you want like a disheveled or more evil looking character, you might want to go really crazy with these. If you want to go for like a sleeker appearance, then just go pretty lenient. Random side quest, I figured out a way to stop these wings from swinging around once they're in place. So I'm going to drill a hole straight through both PVC pipes while holding it in position. This little plug is usually used with like wood, so I'm just going to push it into that hole, and that is it, guys. I'm going to do this with every single one of these because even if they're not moving around right now, it'll stop them moving around later on if they loosen up, and it'll stop the wind catching them and blowing them off place.
Well, that was actually really easy. These are clearly not designed to go on and off this thing, so if these start to wear out after a few wears, I can swap them over for wooden dowels, which I actually happen to have some in the garage that also fit. So that's plan B if these start to break. So where these wings are sitting now is kind of the final position, and I'm pretty happy with this. Like, a lot of them are sloped forwards to give that illusion of them being bigger. There's some depth with some of them like layered slightly forward, some of them slightly back. There's a lot more concentration towards the bottom here as opposed to these top two wings. That is okay with me because there's going to be a lot going on my shoulders and also the headpiece, so they can stay a little bit more sparse up there. Moving on, do you guys remember in the last angel video that I had like just a little bit of this fabric left and I was real salty because Spotlight had discontinued it? Well, mad props to Adele who saw that and actually had like a decent amount left of this exact fabric that I was so happy to get my hands on. Adele, you are amazing. This is kind of the exact thing that I wanted to sort of go along the very top of the wing and kind of cover the awkward spot where the feathers finish.
After days slow cooking in my garage, I'm gonna switch back to fabric glue because any chance I have to not use the hot glue in the garage, I'm gonna take it. Before I glue these edges down, they're all getting cut into some jagged shapes, and I'm gonna run a lighter over the edges here. That is going to like melt and singe the edges so they don't fray. This really only works on synthetic fabrics, and I am wearing my respirator and trying to keep that flame away from the foam of the feathers as much as possible. Luckily, I also kept a lot of my scraps from when I used this fabric on the corset too, so I can cut out even more of these weird jagged shapes and singe those edges off, which means I can now extend that sort of gold drippy, veiny, flamey texture, whatever you want to call it, even further down the wings.
So it's looking a little awkward right now, but trust the process with me, guys. Or don't. I, as per usual, don't entirely know what I'm doing either. Had a big brain moment with these pegs. Each of them are now tied to the screw at the bottom here of each of these, so that essentially when I'm like assembling them or disassembling them, I can plug them in, I can take them out, and I'm never gonna lose them. Genius. Next step. Remember how I made those 5 hand-painted eyeballs for the angel's corset? I made 32 of them.
So that's 32 pieces of white craft foam heated up and stretched over a potion bottle to maintain that slightly spherical shape. And I'm getting pretty practice at painting these up at this stage. We're going for like a darker rim on the outside, a lighter base color, and then stripes of both lighter and darker colors in towards the middle. Finishing off with an ultra matte black beady pupil and 5 or 6 coats of a gloss varnish to keep them looking nice and shiny.
So with 32 of these, if I've maths correctly, that's enough for 4 each wing. wing. I might like vary it a little bit and put some of them on the back if it looks better. I'm just gonna work it out as I go along.
I don't know about you guys, but I am getting deja vu doing all of these eyes. Well, I'm gonna wrap these up the same way I did last time with the same fabric, that sort of honey gold velvet. And somehow these all look way more creepy with the eyelids than without. I guess it's the uncanny valley.
I'm so glad that I did all of these different proportions because you get some great expressions here. Like over here, we've got this nice friendly, hello friend, be not afraid. And then you come over here and you've got like this really suspicious looking squint. Like, I don't know, friend, should you be afraid? What are you afraid of? And then you get, oh, be afraid. Be very afraid.
You know, I've started to notice I rely way more on voiceover towards the end of a project, and I guess that's just because I get so excited for the finish that I just keep barreling on instead of like pausing to explain stuff. And as you can tell, I did exactly the same thing with this one. I'm literally just pinning these in place with some dress pins just so I can make sure I'm happy with the layout of everything. Everything's spread out pretty evenly, like I've got a good variation of color on each wing, and that none of them are like too close together or too spread out or too close towards the end of the wings where it's going to weigh them down. Once I was happy with placement, I can take off each wing one by one and just glue down all of the eyes. Seeing the wings like 95% done at this stage, honestly, I was just chuffed. Chuffed is the word I would use.
All right, so pretty happy with the placement of the eyes overall. So I think I ended up having 30 on there. I've got 2 left over, and I think I'm gonna leave it at 30 because between 30 eyes and if I manage to attach exactly 1,000 feathers, then I'm sticking with these really nice whole numbers, which feels very appropriate for a costume that's so holy. I'll see myself out. There's one more embellishment that I want to add, which is hopefully going to help blend some of the gold elements together. You might have noticed as I was gluing the eyes that the hot glue that I was using had like a gold tint to it, and that is because I'm using metallic gold hot glue sticks. I think people use these as kind of like a fast way to do like wax seals on letters. I got them to try out something like this, which is essentially using it to create these sort of visible, goopy gold veins, which I think ties in really nicely to the elements of like body horror and drippy molten gold that it had in the base costume. It's also almost identical in color to this sort of honey gold velvet that I've used for the eyelids, and that is saying a lot because I've complained last video about how difficult it is to try and match any kind of gold to any other gold. I'm gonna try and be a little bit lenient with this stuff and not go crazy because I want the eyes and the big white feathers to be the focal point, and going ham on the hot glue is gonna add a lot of weight, and since there's 8 wings, that is gonna add up. Anywho, this means applying hot glue to that polyethylene there. This is hot glue on polyethylene foam. Polyethylene. Hot glue on polyethylene. It's not hard when I'm not trying to say the full sentence. This is a garage job because, again, hot glue on polyethylene foam.
And my aim here is to continue the lines from the corners of the eyes down onto the wing and up onto the rest of that gold satin, somewhere between veins and molten gold. And I'm also going to apply some of this one quite heavily under some of the eyelids, kind of like these eyes are also weeping gold. In the base costume, I did this with beading. Sorry, there's no way I'm going to start beading 32 eyeballs.
Good morning, my loves. So last night I finished off all of the veins. That sounds weird. I finished off all the hot glue stuff. I also had a few handfuls of those smaller feathers left over, and I know I cut out some extras for the wings, but I've been keeping track of how many I've been using because I'm, for some reason, really fixated on making sure these wings have exactly 1,000 feathers. So the remaining feathers, I just kind of like snuck into the wings at certain places to fill some gaps. Rather than show you the updated wings on the mannequin, we're just gonna go straight ahead into a fancy reveal because for now, these wings are done. So let's get the base costume on and head outside because I literally can't fit in the house with the wings on.
All right, it's now pretty much dusk. I decided to wait till now to film because when the sun is like pretty low like that, I should get some really nice golden glow on the wings. It also means once the sun goes just below the horizon, I should get some nice even lighting as well. What I didn't consider is that there is no one around to help me at this time of day. So I have to put all this on by myself. So let's hope that I can figure that out like a
strong, independent woman. I am gonna forgo some of the extra accessories and makeup just because it's really just about testing out the wings today. The final reveal with the headpiece, I'll just go all in with everything. But for now, let's worry about this. I'm gonna get into it now before I lose that light.
Now, in hindsight, I had to like semi-disassemble this to get it through the door, but I could have dragged my mannequin out here too, and it would have been way easier to put these all on, especially considering it's not so easy to sit down in a corset covered in gold feathers and eyes. But hey, I've never been one for doing things the easiest and most convenient way, let's be honest. Honestly, even just having like a fold-out table so I didn't have to keep kneeling down to pick things up, because this was even harder as well once I had the wings on, because the bottom wings practically brush along the grass. But that is ultimately why we do these test runs, so that we can figure things out that need changing for next time. Like figuring out some way of keeping these damn pauldrons on. Despite taking way too long to put this on, I managed to catch some of the sun and it was so worth it. Look at this. Oh my gosh.
Okay, couple of small tweaks that I'm gonna have to make for next time. The top wings need to be further away from my head, because anytime I turn my head or move slightly, it's hitting the headpiece and it's constantly like pushing it off place. The other solution is make a much smaller headpiece. I don't think I want to do that. The other issue is that my pauldrons keep falling off, so the Velcro isn't really doing enough. I'm just gonna have to figure out a couple of extra ways to secure them on there. I don't want to sew them onto the straps themselves because I still want to be able to wear the dress, whoa, with the pauldrons and not the wings. As you can see, we are having a very light, mild breeze, which is apparently a problem for this costume. Apart from occasionally throwing my balance, it's really not too bad. So I guess just no high heels in this costume, which is fine. There's enough going on without me being more uncomfortable. Aside from that, everything is amazing. Like everything moves, it's really secure. There's even still like a little bit of movement in the wings, like a little bit of that bounce just to make it feel dynamic without them like getting tangled up against each other. And like I haven't even seen the footage up close yet because I'm just looking in the tiny little viewfinder on the camera and it looks fantastic. There's supposed to be stronger winds coming through, so I'm gonna call it there, go inside, have some dinner, rest my shoulders and make sure I don't get blown away in the process. Good night.
Okay, I actually did stick in this a little bit longer just because I was having so much fun wearing it. It's pretty comfy and I just want to do some more like silly poses and running around and dancing in it like an excited toddler, purely for the purpose of testing out durability, of course. I'm so grateful that I have a backyard big enough to do this as well, because I'm just not sure if I would have the guts to go to like a local park to film this sort of thing. I've done plenty of photo shoots in public, but like this is a whole other level.
So, I did say that you can't wear these inside, but it turns out you can disassemble the wings from the frame, drag the mannequin into your office, and then reassemble 6 out of the 8 wings to make for a precarious background that stretches from one side of the room to the other so that your outro looks especially cool. You guys, I had so much fun making these, like genuinely I had the time of my life, and I hope it shows in the video as well. I'm really happy with how these turned out. That said, I do have like a gut feeling that I'm going to end up changing some things. There's something not quite there that I can't put my finger on, but I am going to hold off on doing any tweaks or changes until I have the final part of this costume done, which is upgrading the headpiece. In case you missed it last video, the one I was wearing for the reveal is like a 5-year-old headpiece and like the first thing I ever made that was biblically accurate angel inspired. I hope you guys can be patient for the headpiece video because I am determined to have a headpiece with blinking and moving eyes, and I am going to need to figure out electronics and servos for that, because in the past I've used puppetry, but I really don't want to be like puppeting a bunch of eyes on my head while I'm like semi-blind and balancing 8 wings on the back. As I've mentioned before, electronics are hard for me, so it's gonna take me a while. Now I want to make a request from you guys that you tell me in the comments your best or worst puns involving eyes, wings, or angels, and maybe I'll do a segment in the next angel video where I read out my faves. To my Aussies, I am going to be at the Game Expo, which is probably happening really soon after I post this video. So if you're around, please come and say hi. I love meeting you guys. I am so excited to be a guest and a judge for the cosplay competition. A huge thank you, as always, to my ultimate supporters on Patreon. Artemis, Michael, Mix Randvi, Rakishan, Residual Images, Robert Mischief, Tamara, Veralyn, and Yuri. You guys are amazing. I appreciate the heck out of you. Also, big thank you to these other amazing patrons who are on screen now. If you want to be as cool and funny and smart as these guys, come come and join us over on Patreon. I post previews, work in progress, and exclusive videos that you cannot find anywhere else. And joining is the best way to support me so I can keep making things as ridiculous as this. But just by liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing it with your boss, you are helping me immensely. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!